Are you familiar with the medieval folklore figure of the Friar Rush, who is the devil in disguise? Why does it seem that the medievals were comfortable with the possibility of religious orders being infiltrated by something, while in modern times it's the stuff of tinfoil hats?
Well, first we've got to tell the audience who Friar Rush was. He taught at my high school. No. Although you would have thought so from some of the characters that taught at my high school. Friar Rush is an old story from the Middle Ages, German and English. The idea is that in a given monastery, this demon enters the monastery in disguise as Friar Rush. And Friar Rush immediately begins corrupting the monastery. He arranges for ladies of ill repute to visit the abbot and the monks. He's on the verge of being found out by the holiest monk in the bunch, who is the kitchener, the cook. And of course that also is kind of a play on something, because people in those days always made fun of the religious for eating well. And so the idea was that the most corrupt monk in the monastery would be the guy that ran the kitchen.
Okay.
But in the Friar Rush stories, it's just the opposite. He's actually the holiest of the bunch.
Okay.
Which, again, is a way of poking fun at people's presuppositions.
Yeah.
You know, because people would think in those days, oh, well, yeah, the friar that runs the kitchen, ha ha ha. Except in the Friar Rush stories, they turn the whole thing on its ear. And he's the holy one.
Yeah.
So he recognizes the demon, nobody else does.
Okay.
So Friar Rush grabs him and throws him in his own cauldron and boils him to death, and then takes his place.
Oh no.
And disguises himself as
the cook.
And so this goes on for some years. He makes much better food than the old cook did, but he causes all kinds of division amongst the monks. Eventually they get a new abbot, and the new abbot recognizes him.
Okay.
So he banishes him from the monastery. And he in turn flees to England and possesses the daughter of the queen and the king, the princess. So I forget exactly how it works, but they figure out where this thing had come from. And so they send for the abbot from that monastery, and he goes to England and he exorcises him and chases him off. So, the monastery being Germany. So that's the story of Friar Rush.
Oh, okay.
Now, what was the second question again?
Why were the medievals so comfortable with the possibility of religious orders being infiltrated, while in modern times it's the stuff of tinfoil hats?
Because they were realistic and we're stupid. Because they really held the faith and we don't.
Well, nowadays we're uncomfortable with the idea of people being possessed in general.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen.
Yeah, of course not. Which is exactly what the devil wants. The devil's, and from Samuel Johnson to God knows how many others, people have said the devil's greatest strength in these days is to convince us he doesn't exist. And of course he does. But whereas in the days of Friar Rush, you had to send a demon to pretend to be a monk, he has plenty of religious and laymen willing to do his work within the church without any need to send a demon in disguise. But yeah, they were. When you say they were comfortable with it, well, of course they didn't think it was a good thing, but they certainly knew that it was possible. And again, as I say, the funny thing about the story of Friar Rush is that it's the cook who figures out the deal. And that, again, the medievals had a sort of prejudice toward the cook and the cellarer and people like that in monasteries. And having him be the holy one, it's very funny. Anyway.
Let's talk more about this. So, monks ate well in monasteries?
Some of them. I mean, it depended. You see, the thing is, remember, when we talk about the Middle Ages, we're talking about a period of about 1,000 years.
Okay.
So about 500 to 1,500, roughly.
Okay.
So in that time, things went up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. The church had periods of strength, periods of weakness, periods of fervor, periods of laxity. The same was true with every religious order, the same was true with every monastery. You read the history of single monasteries, you'll see that they had abbots who were very strong, and periods when they kept the rule very, very strictly, and others when it was kind of laissez-faire, and everybody had a good time, and other periods when perhaps they were downright immoral.
Okay.
These being the three states of religious life.
Right.
Strict and fervent, happy and jolly, and pretty loserish.
Loserish. Okay.
Loserish. So those are the three stages. And very often, if a monastery survived, they would get a reforming abbot who would pull things together and return to their first spirit of fervor. That's why the Carthusians, for instance, referring to this ongoing process, their great motto about themselves is never reformed because never deformed.
Ooh, I like that one.
Yeah, they do too. That's why they say it. But the sad truth of the matter is that human nature is human nature. Give it a chance to stray, and it usually will. So, and the medievals understood that. They were a very understanding bunch. And of course, then as now, from time to time, this sin or that sin would be preponderant in that place or this place. And then, if you're reading some of the sermons from that time, from the Middle Ages, why it is that a priest might go railing on and on and on about this particular sin or that particular sin. Probably because that's what was the most prominent sin at that place at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, if you read it, you think that simony is the worst sin, or sodomy is the worst sin, or adultery is the worst sin, or gluttony is the worst sin. Well, only because at that time there were a lot of simoniacs, sodomites, adulterers, or gluttons.
Mm-hmm.
You have to keep it in balance with everything else. But that's why.
Okay. Still didn't explain why there's a stereotype that monks eat well.
Oh, well, because they don't have anything else to do. And if you've got
not pray, or?
Well, yeah, but if you stop praying rigorously, if you stop observing the rule to within an inch of your life, what do you got left to do? If you're not having women smuggled in. You got to find, look, who developed all of our great liqueurs? Benedictine, Chartreuse, while we're mentioning the Carthusians, Fra Angelico.
Really?
Fra Angelico.
Wow.
The hazelnut liqueur, yeah. Think of all the vineyards. Who invented champagne but a Benedictine monk? Dom Perignon.
Okay.
And mind you, there's nothing wrong with their appreciating the finer things.
Uh-huh.
But they got a reputation for, being very much into it. So the idea was that whoever ran either the wine cellar was surely going to be a drunk. And whoever ran the kitchen was going to be a glutton. So in a lot of medieval folklore and folk painting, the cellarer or the cook would be this enormous behemoth, who's always sampling everything. And, again, that was sometimes true, but it was certainly a big temptation. And that's why it was that way. So, again, this gets turned on its head with Friar Rush. We've got the scrawny cook who, who barely eats anything. And that also explains, though, why the cooking improved so much after he was replaced. Because he wasn't, he may have been a very holy cook, but apparently wasn't a very great one.
Ah. Okay.
Wow, Friar Rush's cooking has really improved. Yeah, it has.